Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy. And it is the end of December 2016. Actually have one more day to go. And I'm a very reflective person, of course, being a card reader. And I thought the other day, looking back on my year in card reading, and I thought I should do a video about my favorite decks, because I started thinking about that as I looked back, and I got some new decks for Christmas and recently, and I've just been aware, as I decided to put those particular decks on my wish list, kind of what I've learned personally about my own preferences. When I would read only for myself, which was the majority of the years, me and maybe a couple of friends or family members or that kind of thing, I could have one deck or maybe two, for long periods of time, not feeling any need for anything else. But when I'm reading a lot for other people, and as I've started to, excuse me, create new spreads and think about how I can serve people, I've investigated different decks a lot more, and I've certainly purchased a lot more than I would ever have imagined I would purchase, just for the sake. I do have an experimental aspect to my personality, and that has suddenly come out in terms of tarot and oracle cards. But I am learning that there are some that work for me and some that don't work very well for me, and sometimes I'm surprised by which ones turn out to be more than novelties. So yeah, and so I'm going to talk first about the cards that have been, I feel, very useful and trusty and just very good for not only reading for myself, but also for reading for other people. And then I'm going to talk about some decks that I don't read very much for with other people. I don't use them very much for reading for other people. One of them I don't think at all, really. But which I use quite a bit and have been very accurate for me and very useful to me in my own personal explorations with the cards. And I'm just thinking there's one more I want to add, kind of. Not using it as much as I was in the beginning of the year. Two of them, actually. I'm going to have two honorable mentions. Two honorable mentions. Where's my other honorable mention? Now that I start thinking about it, I have things rolling. The video is rolling. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, now I feel ready. So obviously the ones that are sitting in front of the camera are my True Blue, Tried and True. And these I got at the very beginning of wanting to read for other people. And they're two oracle decks, because I initially was quite resistant to the idea of returning to tarot. And I do have a video that's about my experience with tarot and some difficulties I had with it the first time I encountered it many years ago, and I used it for quite some time those many years ago, and then just waved it away and decided to work more with oracle decks, particularly animal themed oracle decks. And so I started out with the Enchanted Map as one of the first decks that I got. And I have to say, I will say, there's no real replacement when reading for other people for the standard Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. So, but there's something about it that it works for me, and it works well, in fact. but I think like other people, we just explore. There's something missing in it. I have no idea what that is. But that, you know, if that weren't the case, then we wouldn't constantly be wanting to play with the system or adjust the system. Alright, so this is the Enchanted Map, and if you've been on my channel, you'll recognize this. This wonderful, beautiful, evocative images. Just, I don't know, I can use this for a few cards. I can use this for a full 9-card spread. I can use this for almost anything. I'm not going to say anything. There are times when I really do feel like I need the range of the tarot system. But this is a wonderful, wonderful deck, and it's so wonderful that when I look at the other Colette Baron Reid decks, I don't feel like I need them. I've looked at some of the other ones and I'm like, you know, is that really adding anything to the Enchanted Map? I know there's one out there, and I think it's called something of the Oracle, that some people have said that they prefer that deck to this deck. I don't know. Someday I'm sure I'll get it, and then I will be able to say one way or the other. But I do love this deck, and I actually did not know anything about Colette Baron Reid before getting this. I had not been looking at decks in any manner, didn't realize that there were so many varieties out there until I decided again to start getting into it more myself again and to reading for other people. So, and then here's the wonderful Vintage Wisdom deck, which has surprised me. If anything, I would say that this deck surprised me. I thought it might be a limited deck, and I have not found this to be a limiting deck, that there wouldn't be enough information on each of the cards to do full readings or readings of any depth, and I have not found that to be the case. I can kind of go on and on about some of these cards, especially as they relate to each other. They're very good. These two decks I'm talking about here, the Enchanted Map and the Vintage Wisdom, they work very well together. And, you know, so I've just loved what this deck also can add to other cards. It works very well with other decks, whether it's another Oracle deck or a tarot deck, whatever the case may be. I love using it with other decks. Call it the Sisters, the Aunties. Obviously, both of these decks that I'm talking about are very female-oriented decks. They're working for me. These were also very popular decks when I was doing what I call my chariot spread, my monthly chariot spreads. I would use the Vintage Wisdom for love and the Enchanted Map for the general, and people were really enjoying them, and I'm sure they miss those, and I miss those. But I haven't been able to go back to it time-wise. Just a lovely, lovely deck, evocative, full of strong images. I don't need to walk you through all of it again. If you're on my channel, you've probably seen it a lot. So yes, love these two decks. Love these two decks. And I'm sure I will continue to use them a lot. Alright, and so the next two are tarot decks, themed tarot decks, and this one in particular surprised me. This is the Prairie Tarot. And I just thought, you know, I felt drawn to it, but a lot of the images are very plain. They don't have a lot of handholds to them. And so I thought this was a deck that might be quite limiting for me. Wouldn't be something that I could use all of the time. But I am. I am. I'm totally into the mythos of this deck. I'm into it. I can do this. The Prairie Tarot, the American West, the Frontier Time, the whole settling of the frontier, going out, taking risks, starting anew, all of that stuff. Guarding your treasure. Yes. Are there some cards here that don't quite work for me? Yeah. But then you've got the jackalope, you know. And then you've got, this is one that's a little difficult for me. But overall, and this one is a chariot, is on the difficult side for me. But I ended up understanding what it's about, what she is between, which is the past and the present. So, yeah. So, yep, the Prairie Tarot. The Prairie Tarot does it for me. Surprise. I wasn't expecting it. I really wasn't expecting. That's funky. I like it, but it's funky. So there we go. And then this one, I'm not too surprised that it works for me. I wasn't, and of course anybody who's new to my channel even will recognize these from December's monthly readings. And this is the Mystical Cats Tarot. And I didn't know, I thought I would have fun with it. But I wasn't sure, I guess, what kind of readings it would give. If the readings would end up to me feeling fluffy, and they might feel a shade lighter. Although I have to say, this by no means feels a shade lighter. That's a terrible tug on the heartstrings when I see that. So this, for instance, this is a little bit of a lighter take, but the Ten of Pentacles is always a happy card. So there's a little bit of whimsy to it. There are also changes to the meanings. Some aspects of it, the clan aspects of it, I thought might have more of an influence or just on the deck overall, but it really hasn't. But I'm finding that these images, and what is this? This is the Five of Swords, are easily as evocative, if not more evocative, and even contemporary for, than the Rider-Waite-Smith deck for me, because I'm an animal person. I don't have a lot of, well, I have cats outside that are not my cats, and then I have 2 cats of my own. So I don't know, maybe for somebody who isn't as much into animals, this would seem ridiculous and fluffy. To me, it doesn't. And it seems to work in a variety of ways. I do know that there were some people who, when I started to use this deck, maybe in my weekly readings, thought it was a change to fluff or something, too light. And they disappeared off my channel. But that's okay. And I think that that's true, that, sometimes what a YouTube reader decides to do doesn't work for some people sometimes. As I said earlier, I do have an experimental aspect to my personality, and part of that is trying new decks. Now, if you are having a private reading with me, then you can choose the deck. Then you can choose the deck. But otherwise, no, I'm going to play with the variety that I have. And of course, part of the point of doing this is trying out these decks to see how they work. And I do like how this deck works. And I think even for more serious issues, it gives a perfectly valid reading, but might give a little bit of a lighter touch, which can be emotionally appreciated, whether by somebody I'm reading for or by myself. What do the kitties have to say, What do the kitties have to say? And I find that this is very good for career-oriented readings. So now the personal decks. So now I'm going to decks that were really working for me personally. And one is the very enigmatic deck, the Shaman Oracle. The Shaman Oracle. And I don't feel like I can read it for other people very much because I feel like, for one, it does require the guidebook, looking at the guidebook. For me, it does require looking at the guidebook. Which can be awkward when you're reading for someone else. And it involves a kind of a shamanic system in the grouping of the cards that in some ways requires both me and the other person to understand shamanism. And I think actually this deck is edging me toward shamanism, to be totally honest. That and other things in my environment. But I found that this deck, and it's funky. Yep, it's weird. So you can't really read just the images. I can't. You know, maybe some people who are more intuitive or psychic readers could. And I do consider myself a relatively intuitive reader, but not super intuitive and not psychic for the most part. But they're very strange, okay, images, evocative images, but weird images, okay. But what I've found is that when I draw a card frequently, especially if something as weird as the cards has kind of gone on in my life, or there's something I'm trying to figure out that's a little bit, excuse me, unclear, undefined, I don't know what it connects to, where it's going to, pulling one of these cards, and usually it is only one of these cards, and then consulting the guidebook will give me an oh my gosh kind of a reading, or I can't believe that card came up. Okay, you know, or there's a lot of, for me, I'm getting a lot of truth telling going on in this deck, or reflecting back to me something. It's like something happens and I'm wanting to take it symbolically, and this comes back and say, no, you need to take that literally. This is really what's happening. Or I, you know, consult about something literally, and it says, no, you need to think about this symbolically. So I feel like this helps to orient me, or reorient me, or gives me, helps me think about life's mysteries. Doesn't really help me solve them necessarily, but helps me think about them and frame them. So I've gotten so that I feel like it's a very personal deck, and I'm not sure. I have recently been thinking about possibly using it for some other readings I'm going to do on my channel, general readings. But I'm not sure that I would ever really pull it out for another person, doing a reading for another person. So the last, well, I'm not going to say the last one. The other one that I have really loved working with, I haven't worked with it too much recently, and I miss it. I miss it. This is something. It's a Lenormand. It's my enchanted Lenormand. That's right. The mice, it's eating away at me that I haven't used my enchanted Lenormand for a while. There's the backing. So, yes, instead of a daily draw, I liked for quite some time to, you know, do a 3-carder with the Lenormand. In fact, maybe I'll go back to that. I love using the Lenormand that way. It's direct enough. You know, my life is not. middle-aged and settled, you know, so there's not a lot of wild things going on. And so I feel like this can have to do a lot with everyday life. I also love the 36 card structure in the sense that you can spread it out and choose some cards instead of having to shuffle. When you've got these big decks like this, it's hard to have a table big enough to smear them around, and I kind of like this smearing method of choosing cards, at least when I'm choosing them for myself. But with the Lenormand, I can do this, and there's that tree again. Apparently I need to think about growth and health and natural health, which I have been, is a very dominant aspect of my life right now. So there you go, my enchanted Lenormand. And I love doing grand tableaus. I do. I love using it for relationships. I love my Lenormand. And I do use my Lenormand for other people. But I think for people who are asking for a reading that aren't familiar with the Lenormand system, to do something like a grand tableau is overwhelming for them. And I guess I haven't gotten into doing 9 carders with the Lenormand, which would be a nice in-between. And so maybe I need to think about that a little bit. Because I certainly do think that this deck can be used for other people. I just haven't focused on that. I focused more on oracle decks and tarot cards. Okay, so the 2 honorable mentions I was going to bring up. Personally, an honorable mention is the fairies. Froude's Fairies Oracle. And I love the fairies, but when I first, this was one of those things like with the cats, when I started to use the cats, and people were like, ewy, I don't think that's valid. People started abandoning ship. The first time I tried, and I love the fairies, this creepy dude, yes, he's creepy, but he doesn't bother me. But it does bother some people. It freaks some people out. So people who are, it's funny because when I use this deck, which people are thinking is too weird, too, you know, I think some of the things it's a matter of it being too in your face and too gross. These are not pretty cute little creatures. They're kind of goony little creatures. So you have people who abandon ship because of that, and then you have people who abandon ship because this is too light. So it's like one or the other. And I'm not going to worry about it because, you know, that's not quite why I'm here. But so, I love the fairies. I love the fairies. And when I am not using the fairies, I mean, you know, the Glominous Doom. How could you not love the Glominous Doom? When I'm not using the fairies, I do miss them as well. They will come up in my life, but when I try to use them, and I think they're wonderful in a 5-card spread. But when I was doing that, people were freaked out. People were freaked out. They couldn't relate to it. It was just too weird. Maybe too dark. Maybe just too weird. I don't know. But it's not too weird for me. I'm into the fairies. But for that reason, having gotten that kind of response from others about the energy of this deck, I don't pull it out very much for other people at this point. I do use it primarily for myself. It is up on my website, actually, as one of the decks that you can request, and people generally don't request it. I need to put more of these decks up there. I haven't. And the other honorable mention, which I use for myself and I use for other people. I don't know why my little dog's down there growling. Because she wants me to throw her little toy. So when I'm through with this, I'll be playing with my puppy. This is Soul Cards. And Soul Cards is wonderful. I found primarily, although I find these images very evocative, and I can draw all kinds of things out of them. I do find that they're best used with another card, another deck, as additional information. But I do, on their own, I think they're highly evocative. Very evocative. Someday, this is Soul Cards 2. Someday I'll get Soul Cards 1 as well. And I would do a 9-card spread solely with these cards. That would not disturb me in the least. I think that they're very good for intuitive reading. If you haven't seen these cards, there is no guidebook for these cards. There's only the images, so it is all intuitive. But I think they can say so much. And in relation to each other, they say a lot. And they add a lot of perspective when added, like pulling 3 cards of one deck. This would be an odd deck to use with it, but if you did, drawing 3 cards, and then 3 of the Prairie Tarot, and then 3 of this. Usually I use this with another Oracle deck, now that I come to think of it. Not all the time. But if you've been with my channel, you've seen these cards before. You know the soul cards. So they're kind of a runner-up because they do kind of have limitations. I can't. I don't know. They're, again, I need to get them up on my website so that people can choose them for readings. But I think you have to be the right person to want a reading from these. Maybe there are some people for who these are too strange as well. But mostly I've gotten positive feedback on my channel when I've used the soul cards. Okay. And I think that's it. I will do actually a separate video after playing with my puppy so that she shuts up and stops growling. She has her toy and she wants me to grab it and pull it from her and throw it for her, and I'm going to go do that now. So thank you very much for stopping by and listening. I'd be happy to hear your feedback on these various decks. I know that each of them has, at least some of them that I've mentioned, have fans. And then I'm going to do one about decks in 2016 that have disappointed me, that I've gotten with high hopes and have ended up flat or fallen flat or not. I don't know. They ended up, you know, those ones you really want to get, and then they just sort of fall flat once you get them. So I'm going to do a separate video for that. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by and listening to Deck Talk. All right, take care. Bye-bye.